The twin suns of Valthera hung low over the crimson forest, their dying light scattering gold and blood across the leaves. Captain Elias Grant adjusted the ceremonial armor over his shoulders, feeling the weight of it dig into old scars. He hated pomp, but today's mission demanded diplomacy, not warfare. Humanity had spent decades reaching for the stars. Valthera was a prize too valuable to alienate. Across the grand clearing, framed by colossal trees whose trunks shimmered like metal, the Valtheran queen stood radiant and untouchable. Her skin shimmered faintly, an iridescent glow that pulsed in rhythm with the planet itself. Around her, noble guards in leaf-like armor formed a living barrier, each gaze sharp and suspicious. Elias watched her carefully. Majesty, yes, but also loneliness, he thought. The ambassador, a stiff diplomat from Earth named Merin, droned on about treaties and shared futures. Elias barely listened. His role was simple: stand tall, stay silent, and look like humanity's strength made flesh. He shifted slightly, eyes never resting long in one place. Something itched at the edges of his instincts, a wrongness he couldn't yet name. The queen's gaze flickered to him once, quick as a darting bird. A flash of curiosity. A second later, the first arrow split the air. Elias moved before thought could catch up. A black shape arced overhead. He lunged, throwing himself in front of the queen as two more arrows whistled past, embedding themselves in the soft earth where she had stood. Pain blossomed in his shoulder, sharp and sudden, as a shaft buried itself deep. Screams erupted. The clearing dissolved into chaos. Valtheran guards spun and drew weapons shaped like living bone. Elias felt another impact, his leg folding beneath him as another arrow found its mark. Poison, he realized grimly, his limbs were already burning, growing heavy. He forced himself up, staggering to shield the queen's slight frame with his own. From the tree line, figures in crude armor charged, shouting in a guttural, alien tongue. Rebels, not part of the queen's court. Splinters of vision swam before Elias's eyes, but he drew his sidearm with a snarl and fired into the oncoming wave. The pistol cracked again and again, each shot dropping a rebel or driving them back into the trees. Valtheran guards joined the fray, moving with eerie grace. Behind him, the queen remained still, her hands folded, her expression unreadable. Not panic, something deeper. Calculation, maybe. Or sorrow. Elias dropped to one knee as the strength fled his body. Another volley of arrows darkened the sky. He lifted his wounded arm without thinking, a futile shield against what would surely end him. But the guards reached him first, forming a solid ring around the queen and her battered protector. Arrows clattered harmlessly against lead armor. Moments later, the forest swallowed the last of the attackers. Silence fell, broken only by Elias's ragged breathing. He slumped forward, catching himself with his good arm. Blood soaked the earth beneath him, darker than the crimson leaves. The queen stepped forward, light on her feet. She knelt beside him, her fingertips brushing the wound at his side. Her skin felt cool against the fevered heat of his own. "You are wounded," she said, her voice low and strange, like a river whispering through stones. "No kidding," Elias rasped. His vision blurred. He blinked hard, trying to stay conscious. "Your Majesty, safe." The queen studied him with an intensity that unnerved him more than the battle had. "You placed yourself between death and me," she said, almost wondering aloud. "Few of my own would dare." He grunted, half laugh, half cough. Part of the job. From somewhere in the swirling haze of his mind, he became aware of shouting, the ambassador barking orders, the Valtheran guards gathering bodies. Hands lifted him, too rough, too fast. He groaned as the world tilted and spun. "Careful," the queen commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "He is under my protection now." Those words followed him into darkness, a warm anchor against the cold void dragging him under. When he woke, the forest was gone. He lay on a bed of woven fibers that cradled his battered body, the air rich with the scent of unknown flowers and antiseptic oils. Strange lights floated overhead, drifting lazily like jellyfish. He tried to move and discovered his body did not agree with the idea. Pain crackled along his limbs like static. Footsteps, soft and deliberate, approached. Elias turned his head, muscles screaming in protest. The queen stood beside him, her hands clasped before her, her luminous eyes locked onto his. "You live," she said, and there was no small amount of satisfaction in it. "Glad to disappoint whoever bet against me," Elias croaked. His throat felt like it had been sandpapered clean. The queen inclined her head. "Rest, Elias Grant of Terra. Your fight is not yet finished." He wanted to ask what she meant, but exhaustion dragged him back into uneasy sleep before the words could leave his lips. Outside the woven walls, Valthera turned its many eyes toward the future, and in dark corners, new blades were being sharpened. The second time Elias woke, the light was softer, tinted violet by translucent panels overhead. His body ached, but the sharp, raw edges of pain had dulled to a manageable throb. Someone had stripped him of the ruined armor and dressed him in a simple tunic woven from unfamiliar fibers. His right arm was strapped tightly against his chest, and strange metallic vines coiled along his injured leg, pulsing faintly as they worked. He turned his head cautiously and found the queen sitting beside his bed. She wore no crown, no heavy ceremonial garb, only a flowing robe the color of deep twilight. Without the armor of her station, she seemed younger, almost mortal. "You heal quickly," she said, watching him with those unsettling eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone. "Human stubbornness," Elias muttered, voice still raspy but stronger than before. A flicker of amusement crossed her features, gone almost before he could mark it. She reached forward, touching a control embedded in the wall. A low chime sounded, and moments later a figure entered, a healer, he assumed, draped in robes adorned with living symbols that writhed and shifted. The healer murmured something in the Valthran tongue, scanned Elias with a device shaped like an open flower, then withdrew. "You will walk again soon," the queen said once they were alone. "Not without pain, but you will walk." "Good to know," Elias replied. "Better than the alternative." The queen studied him in silence. It was not the cold observation of a scientist or ruler inspecting a tool. It was closer to the way a soldier studies the battlefield, reading every scar, every wound, every weakness. "You do not understand what you have done," she said finally. "Saved your life. Figured that was enough." "In our tradition," she continued, ignoring his flippancy, "to interpose yourself between death and the monarch is to claim a bond. Bloodbound. It is sacred. Unbreakable." Elias frowned. "Sounds complicated." "It is," she agreed, a shadow passing over her expression. "And now you are at the center of something much larger than you realize." He shifted uncomfortably against the bedding. "Wasn't exactly looking for a promotion." She stood and paced slowly, her movements as fluid as a drifting mist. "There are those among my people who see this bond as a threat. A human, bound to their queen? It offends their pride, their history. Already whispers stir in the court. Some wish to unmake the bond, violently." "Let me guess," Elias said dryly. "I'm easier to kill than you are." The queen's lips pressed into a thin line. She neither confirmed nor denied, and that was answer enough. He exhaled heavily, wincing as bruised ribs protested. "So what's the plan, Your Majesty? I stay in this cozy bed while people out there sharpen knives." "You heal," she said, tone brooking no argument. "And then you choose. Stay by my side and face the storm, or return to your people and pretend none of this ever happened. And leave you without a shield." Elias shook his head. "Not really my style." For the first time, something softened in her gaze, not gratitude exactly, but a grudging respect. "You are not what I expected from the children of Terra," she said. "We're full of surprises," Elias said. "Some good, some less so." She allowed herself a small smile, and the tension in the room eased, if only slightly. Still, undercurrents of danger ran thick through the air, and Elias knew instinctively that the greatest battles lay ahead, not with arrows and blades, but with words, alliances, and betrayals. In the days that followed, the Queen visited him often. At first, their conversations were stilted, formal exchanges governed by the thick walls of protocol. But necessity wore down formality faster than ceremony could repair. He learned her name was Siratai, though none among her court dared speak it aloud. He learned she had ascended the throne not through inheritance, but through blood and fire during a civil war that left scars on her soul deeper than any blade could carve. In return, he shared pieces of his own history, battles fought on dusty colonies, comrades lost to pointless wars, the hollow ache that followed every so-called victory. She listened without judgment, her eyes dark pools that reflected his pain back at him. One evening, as the twin moons of Valthera rose like watching eyes, she brought him a gift, a knife, its blade folded from layers of living metal, its hilt shaped to fit his hand perfectly. A symbol of trust, she explained. A bond not of obligation, but of choice. I do not give this lightly, she said, offering the blade across both palms. Elias took it without hesitation. Its weight was strange, almost alive, humming against his skin. I'll do right by you, he said simply, and she nodded, the pact sealed without need for further words. But in the darkened corners of the Queen's sprawling palace, new whispers festered. Enemies unseen plotted behind smiles, sharpening not just weapons, but lies and betrayal. Elias felt it as surely as a cold draught against the spine. Healing was a luxury he could no longer afford. The storm was gathering, and he would be ready. The night of the assault came without warning, though Elias had been expecting it for days. He stood on the balcony of the Queen's private chamber, the twin moons slicing pale crescents across the sky, the knife she had gifted him strapped securely to his side. His body still bore the aches of healing wounds, but adrenaline masked the worst of it. Movement below caught his eye, shadows slipping through the palace gardens, too deliberate to be mere servants or guards. He touched the com bead nestled in his ear. Intruders, northwest quadrant. Multiple, he whispered, already drawing the blade in one hand, his pistol in the other. Before the palace guards could respond, the first explosion shattered the outer gates. Cries echoed through the night as figures in dark armor poured into the courtyard, weapons flashing in the moonlight. Elias sprinted back inside, meeting Queen Siratai as she emerged from her chambers, already armored, her calm demeanor belying the chaos outside. They move faster than we anticipated, she said, her voice a steady anchor. Good, Elias growled. Means they are desperate. He fell into step beside her, cutting through winding halls lit by trembling blue flames. Loyal guards rallied to them, forming a protective phalanx, but Elias knew they were outnumbered. The rebels were betting on speed, on overwhelming force before the palace could react. A shout rang out ahead. A group of rebels rounded the corner, blades raised. Elias moved without thinking. He fired twice, dropping the lead attacker, then closed the distance, slashing low with his knife. The living metal of the blade sang as it met flesh and bone, cutting cleanly. The Queen fought beside him, her movements sharp and efficient, a testament to battles fought long before crowns had weighed her down. Step by bloody step, they fought their way toward the inner sanctum, where the Queen's throne pulsed with the very heart of Valthera's power. If the rebels seized it, her reign would end not just in death, but disgrace. In the grand atrium before the throne, the final stand awaited. The rebel leader, a towering Valtheran with skin the color of burnt copper, stood at the head of his forces. His armor was adorned with trophies torn from slain nobles, and his eyes burned with fanatic hatred. Traitor Queen, he spat, voice carrying across the marble floor. You bow to off-world vermin. You betray our blood. Siratai raised her chin, her gaze cold and unyielding. You betray Valthera with your cowardice. The rebel leader snarled and surged forward, blade poised to strike. Elias intercepted him mid-charge, their weapons clashing in a shriek of metal. Pain lanced through Elias's side as the force of the impact reopened old wounds, but he held his ground. The rebel was stronger, fresher, but Elias was meaner. Every scar, every loss, had forged him into a weapon tempered by survival. He let the rebel's blade slide past his guard just enough to open a path, then drove his own knife into the gap under the enemy's arm, twisting brutally. The rebel gasped, staggered back, and Siratai finished him with a precise thrust of her spear through his heart. The remaining rebels faltered, leaderless. Palace guards surged forward, cutting them down or forcing surrender. The atrium fell into a grim, heavy silence broken only by the labored breathing of the victors. Elias staggered, clutching his side. Warm blood slicked his fingers, but he forced himself upright as Siratai approached. She reached out, steadying him with one hand. "You are bleeding," she said quietly, anger and concern threading her voice. "Occupational hazard," he muttered. "You must rest." He shook his head. "Had enough resting." For a long moment, she simply stared at him. Then, without ceremony, she placed her hand over his heart. The gesture was intimate, powerful. Around them, the surviving guards knelt, heads bowed, acknowledging what had just passed between their queen and her bloodbound. "You have fought for me not once, but twice," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the blood-stained hall. "You have bound yourself to Valthera's fate. If you will have it, I offer you a place by my side, not as servant, but as consort, protector, and equal." The hall seemed to hold its breath. Elias, battered and bone-weary, felt the weight of the moment settle around him. Earth was distant, a world he barely remembered. Here, he had fought. Here, he had bled. Here, he was seen, not as a tool, but as a soul. He gave a crooked smile. "Sounds better than another medal back home." Siratai's lips curved into a smile of her own, rare and genuine. She drew him close, resting her forehead lightly against his, a Valtheran gesture older than written memory. Around them, the palace stirred with new life. Loyalists rallied, fires were quenched, and the first whispers of a new era began to ripple outward into the dark. Elias closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of scars old and new. They had not been given in vain. They were the price of belonging, and the reward was worth every drop of blood spilled along the way. Outside, the twin moons shone brighter, as if bearing silent witness to a bond that would change the fate of two worlds. The days following the failed coup blurred into a haze of ritual, politics, and recovery. Elias had expected quiet, some kind of peace after the bloodshed, but Valthera was a world where rest was a performance, and victory had consequences. Every step he took beside Queen Siratai was watched. Every word weighed. The blood they had spilled had not silenced opposition, it had crystallized it. The rebellion's leader was dead, but the ideology had roots that grew deeper than any blade could sever. "You've made me a symbol," Elias muttered as the two of them stood in the shadowed corridor behind the grand chamber. His uniform was black and silver now, marked with the sigils of the bloodbound, ornate, alien, and unmistakable. Symbols are hard to kill, but easy to hate. Siratai didn't answer right away. Her gaze was fixed ahead, through the thin veil of light that separated them from the gathered council beyond. Dozens of nobles, each cloaked in the elegance of lineage and lies, waited to dissect their next move. The queen turned to Elias, her expression unreadable. "I did not make you anything," she said quietly. "You became what they could not ignore." Elias gave a dry smile. "Comforting." They entered the chamber together, every whisper silenced by their arrival. Siratai moved with the fluid authority of a monarch, but Elias felt the tension ripple beneath the air like static. The council was not gathered to celebrate, they were here to challenge. A tall noble in emerald armor rose first. Lord Veying, highborn and serpent-tongued. "Your Majesty," he began, the honorific sharp with disdain, "this Terran continues to stand where one of our own should. With all respect, is this the future of our court?" Murmurs of agreement stirred like dry leaves. Elias resisted the urge to laugh. He'd survived shrapnel, betrayal, and poison-tipped arrows. This room of powdered egos was nothing in comparison. But it wasn't his place to speak first. Siratai did not raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You question the future while standing upon the corpse of the past. He fought where others fled. He bled when others cowered. Is that not the essence of our creed?" "And yet," Veying said, stepping forward, "he is not of our blood. Can he speak for us, defend us, understand us? Or is he a weapon you wield until you no longer need him?" That landed harder than expected. Elias saw it in the queen's eyes, a flicker of something old. Not guilt. Memory. She turned, slowly, and gestured to Elias. Speak, if you would. Elias stepped forward, his boots echoing in the vast chamber. Every face turned toward him, most unreadable, some openly hostile. I'm not here to pretend I'm one of you, he said. I didn't grow up under your stars. I don't know your proverbs, your sacred rites, or your noble lineages. What I do know is pain. War. Loyalty. I've seen what it takes to hold a line when everything around you is collapsing. That's not blood. That's will. Silence. And if that's not enough, he added, voice low but clear, then maybe your problem isn't me. Maybe it's that your titles don't mean as much as you think they do. The tension cracked like thunder. Some gasped. A few counselors shifted uncomfortably. But no one spoke. Siratai stepped forward. This council will remember what was said here. And if they are wise, they will act accordingly. Later, in the quiet of her private chambers, Elias leaned against the window frame, watching the pale storm clouds coil above the forest canopy. Siratai stood nearby, her expression unreadable. You spoke truth, she said. Even if it cost you favor. Elias shrugged. Truth has a price either way. She moved beside him, close enough that their shoulders brushed. There are those who now see you as a threat, not because of what you are, but what you could become. He turned toward her. And what's that? Her gaze was solemn. A king. He laughed, genuinely and without restraint. I'm no king. I'm not even comfortable in these robes. She didn't laugh, but there was a softness in her silence. Elias looked back toward the storm. They are not finished. The ones who tried to kill you, there'll be more. Cleaner. Smarter. Maybe even from inside your court. I know, she said. So what do? We endure, she said. We build something that cannot be torn down with steel or whispered away in shadow. And if it falls anyway, then we fall standing. Elias nodded slowly, the storm outside reflecting something that now lived within him. He had come to this world as a bodyguard, a soldier, a nameless piece of machinery in humanity's larger campaign. But here, in the broken light beside a queen with eyes full of fire, he had found something no war had ever given him: purpose. And though the battles to come would be fiercer than any before, he knew this with certainty: he would face them without fear. Because some things, once earned in blood, were worth protecting until the end.